අලුතෙන් SLT Mobitel Home 4G LTE connection ගන්නාට වටිනා tab computers සහ data දීමනා. අලුතෙන් SLT Mobitel Home 4G LTE connection ගන්නාට වටිනා tab computers සහ data දීමනා.
පැස් සබන් බිලිඳ සම්ට විශේෂයෙන්ම නිෂ්පාදිතයි. SLS ප්‍රමිතිසාධකය සහිතයි.
Tonight, taking a firm stance, Sri Lanka faces the music at the UNHRC and accuses it of misusing its mandate.
There are serious anomalies and weaknesses. It is a matter for deep regret that numerous instances of unsubstantiated allegations and superficial conclusions have found their way into the report.
The right people. Expert calls for a pro-policy shift in government.
What happens in this country is the politicians get involved in doing the strategy. Some of them are educated, but how many of them are there? Less than 10%?
On the way out, tomorrow's power cuts reduced to 2.5 hours with further reductions expected. Warning shots. Russia fires back with a fake news law that sees international networks halt reports. All that and much more coming up on First at 9. This Saturday, the 5th of March, 2022.
Dove Anti-Dandruff.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening, welcome to First at 9. I'm Hamna Kekanai. Now then, the long-anticipated report from the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, on Sri Lanka was presented at the Council, in which she called on member states to pursue alternative strategies at international level to further accountability in the country. But her observations weren't without opposition, as Foreign Minister Professor G.L. Pires accused Bachelet's office of overstepping its mandate and rejected her report as having superficial conclusions. United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, presented her report on Sri Lanka at the 49th regular session of the UNHRC in Geneva last evening. There was little change from the unedited version of the report released earlier during the week. Once more, Bachelet called on the Council to pursue alternative strategies at international level to advance accountability in Sri Lanka.
The current government has not only demonstrated its unwillingness to pursue accountability, it has incorporated military officials implicated in alleged war crimes into the highest levels of government, reinforcing a narrative of impunity. For these reasons, I have called on the Council to pursue alternative strategies to advance accountability at the international level. Regarding our implementation of the accountability-related aspect of Resolution 46/1, preparatory work is underway. Our team will analyze the information that has been consolidated in the evidence repository using a criminal justice perspective, with a view to identifying gaps and priorities for further information collection and incorporating a victim-centered approach. As long as impunity prevails, Sri Lanka will not achieve genuine reconciliation and sustainable peace.
Then it was the turn for Foreign Minister Professor G.L. Pires to respond on behalf of the Sri Lankan government.
The Resolution 46/1 on Sri Lanka was adopted by a divided vote in this Council. Sri Lanka and other member states opposed this resolution in fundamental disagreement with its deeply flawed procedure and unacceptable content, in particular its operative paragraph 6 regarding a so-called evidence-gathering mechanism. The resolution was directly contrary to the Council's founding principles of impartiality, objectivity, and non-selectivity. I have stated Sri Lanka's views on this matter to this Council on the 1st of March. We also submitted in a timely manner our comments on the High Commissioner's report. We note with regret that the Secretariat failed to publish this simultaneously with the High Commissioner's written update. Despite our rejection of the resolution, we will continue our voluntary international undertakings on human rights and engage with the United Nations, including with this Council. We are convinced that there are serious anomalies and weaknesses in the report presented to this Council by the High Commission. The fundamental deficiency is its intolerably intrusive character, impinging as it does on core functions and responsibilities of organs of the Sri Lankan state, overwhelmingly mandated by the people of our country at 3 successive elections. There is as well a clearly discernible element of discrimination in that the Council would certainly not take it upon itself to embark on a similar inquisitorial procedure in respect of other member states. This in itself strikes at the very root of the foundations of the United Nations system. It is a matter for deep regret that numerous instances of unsubstantiated allegations and superficial conclusions, insensitive to the complexity of ground situations, have found their way into the report. We are dismayed by the High Commissioner's unwarranted onslaught on seminal institutions of our country, which function under the aegis of Sri Lanka's constitution and legal system. My country reaches out to the international community with a sincere exhortation to join us as partners on a footing of equality and mutual respect to face the challenges ahead.
Following the Foreign Minister's remarks, the floor was open for envoys of other member states to express their views on the UN Human Rights Chief's observations on Sri Lanka. The observations of the likes of the European Union, the Nordic countries, Canada, as well as the core group, which includes the United Kingdom and the United States, among several other nations, went to form. They agreed and welcomed Bachelet's report, but there were also some opposing views as well.
Politically motivated pressure and biased approach is counterproductive that undermine the dialogue and cooperation for the genuine promotion and protection of human rights. We note with appreciation the sincere efforts made by the government of Sri Lanka for the promotion and protection of human rights in the country, despite many challenges. We urge OHCR to encourage genuine dialogue and cooperation with Sri Lanka, carry out the work based on its mandate in an objective impartial manner, and stand against politicization, selectivity, and double standards of human rights.
The Philippines voted against HRC Resolution 46/1 as we disagree with the role being set for the OHCHR in collecting evidence and developing strategies for future accountability processes. The decision of the OHCHR to establish an accountability project is a breach of the text of the mandate and, in effect, a usurpation of the role of the state as duty bearer. We are not convinced that OHCHR has the mandate and capacity to carry out this so-called project with the highest standards of objectivity and professional rigor. The exorbitant cost of the mandate in the region of $3 million, mainly for the salaries of 12 new P-level UN staff for 1 year, has little to offer to concrete programs to strengthen national accountability mechanisms.
In view of Nepal's own experience of a successful, homegrown and nationally led peace process, we underscore that such aspects need to be given due consideration while promoting reconciliation, accountability, human rights, and lasting peace in Sri Lanka. We believe that the Council's work should be guided by the spirit of genuine dialogue and cooperation and should be based on the objective, non-selective and impartial approach while refraining from the politicization of the human rights issues.
In the meantime, neighbouring India too weighed in.
We call upon Sri Lanka to take the necessary steps to address the legitimate aspirations of the Tamil community, including by carrying forward the process of reconciliation and implementation of the 13th Amendment to the Constitution of Sri Lanka. We will continue to urge the Sri Lankan government for the early conduct of elections to the provincial councils in keeping with its commitments to devolution of power.
Economist Dr. Tissa Jayavira believes that Sri Lanka has got the strategy formulation process the wrong way round, as politicians are the ones doing it and not the permanent staff of the administration sector. His views came during a conversation with Indivari Amwatha on our current affairs program at Hyde Park on AdaDerana 24.
Do you think something should have been done without allowing the country go into this situation? Or was it purely due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the Easter Sunday effects that led the country to this foreign exchange crisis?
We are whole time giving excuses, but we have no policies. There is no red line policy in this country now. See, when you do economics, there is a median line. If you are heading below the median line, that means danger. Whether it is foreign currency, foreign debt, reserves of the country, country growth, all that should be above the median line. When there is a dip, the red alert must go and the economists must get together and start thinking, okay, this is going to happen. Let's change the focus. Let's change our strategy. It doesn't happen in this country. We go and push the panic button. That doesn't work for a country to develop. We are not focused. That's what our administrators, especially the permanent employees or the permanent staffs and the secretaries, have to come up with their strategies. It's not a politicized strategy. What happens in this country is the politicians get involved in doing the strategy. Some of them are educated, but how many of them are there? Less than 10% are educated.
You say Sri Lanka's economic model needs a drastic change. But given the present circumstances, we see crisis developing in Eastern Europe. Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the crisis that is developing there, and of course Sri Lanka's current urgency in managing the foreign currency reserves position. Do you think there is room for Sri Lanka to make all these changes?
Definitely. We have to think out of the box. We are still in the box. We have to look at economic strategy. I mean, wars are there all the time. What we have to do is keep the economy going. Now see, for example, we use a lot of diesel vehicles. Why are electric vehicles not being used in this country? Now USA has come up with 2035, no more fuel-driven vehicles. It should be electric. Of course, for production of electricity, a certain amount of fuel is required, but that is required to keep the economy and the vehicles moving, not for consumption. I was in a certain neighboring country. They're gone heavy into solar, but their solar is 12 feet above the ground. So I asked them why. The farmers are growing vegetables under the solar panel. 60% of the sunlight passes through the solar panel and hits the ground, maximizing the land utilization. Now we don't think of, now this is a country that is abundant in solar, but we are not making it, we are talking about it. Now all the roofs in this country can be converted to solar. All the factories, roofs can be converted to solar. Why are we not doing it? Then the lakes can be converted into solar industry. There was a project and heavy publicity was given that they are going to use the lakes for solar panels. I don't know what happened to it. I went around the country, didn't see any solar panels in our lakes. So why are we not using? We are, as I said, we are talkers.
Moving on with other local stories now then, the Ministry of Health has done away with its previously issued restrictions on the burial of COVID-19 victims. With that, family members will be permitted to bury their loved ones at any cemetery or burial grounds of their choice in the country.
The Ministry of Health has cancelled all previous circulars issued in relation to the handling of COVID dead and the disposal of remains. The statement explains that the decision was taken after considering the evolving knowledge, clinical practices and management protocols of the COVID-19 virus. Accordingly, from now on, no post-mortem PCR tests will be carried out and the disposal of remains can now be done according to pre-pandemic procedures. The circular has also lifted all restrictions on where remains can be buried. This means that there will no longer be designated burial sites for COVID dead. This is especially good news in relation to burial of COVID dead according to Islamic customs and now allows burials at any cemetery or burial ground. Since the lifting of the ban on COVID burials early last year, they were only limited to a specially designated area in Uddamavadi Batiklo that was heavily criticized by civil society members. The decision is a timely one, with Sri Lanka's human rights sessions under the spotlight at the United Nations Human Rights Commission sessions currently underway in Geneva. The circular, however, adds that remains should be disposed of within 24 hours of handover by hospital authorities and prohibits transportation of the remains to any other place other than the burial site. This means that remains cannot be placed at family homes or funeral parlours for public display or even embalmed. According to the new procedure, the COVID-19 remains will be placed in a leak-proof bag and placed in a coffin that is to be provided by the family. Further, the circular designates COVID deaths that occur 7 days after a PCR or antigen test as normal deaths and will be handed over to relatives.
Big 3.
Welcome back, you're watching First at 9. Now, with fuel being unloaded and distributed today, the public are set to get some minor relief from the power cuts from tomorrow, with the durations of interruptions having been reduced to 2.5 hours. With that, in the view of the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation, the country's current fuel shortage is expected to ease as well, with stocks on their way to filling stations across the island.
The country's fuel crisis that has also led to an island-wide power crisis is expected to be brought to some semblance of stability from today, the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation says. Ceylon Petroleum Corporation Chairman Sumit Vijayasinghe announced this today, saying that the massive queues that have been seen outside filling stations will see a gradual reduction.
මේ වන විට රටට අවශ්‍ය ඉන්ධන ආනයනය කරලා ඒ ඉන්ධන ගොඩබෑම ආරම්භ කරලා තියෙනවා. ගොඩබෑම ආරම්භ කරලා විතරක් නෙමෙයි අවශ්‍ය ඉන්ධන දිවයින පුරා බෙදා හැරීමේ කටයුතු මේ වෙනකොට ආරම්භ කරලා තියෙන්නේ. මම හිතනවා දැන් මේ මොහොත වෙනකොට ඉන්ධන පිරුණු රැසක් ඉදිරියේ තිබුණු දිගු පෝලිම් යම් ප්‍රමාණයකට අඩු වෙලා ඒක අද දවසත් ගත වෙනකොට මෙම තත්ත්වය සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම විසඳෙන බව තමයි අපේ විශ්වාසය. නිසා ඉදිරි දින කිහිපේ කිසිදු ආකාරයක තෙල් හිඟයක් හෝ ප්‍රමාණයේ අඩුවීමක් සිද්ධ වෙන්න නැහැ කියන එක අපි ඉතාමත් වාක්‍යයෙන් මේ අවස්ථාවේ කියනවා.
In the meantime, Minister of Transport Dilum Amanugama attended the commencement of a program to begin issuing diesel at 45 SLTB depots across the island. Speaking to media at one such site, the minister revealed that private buses too can get sufficient diesel at the state-run bus depots. He added that buses running short routes will be given an allocation of 100 litres of diesel, while long-distance buses will be issued 150 litres of diesel. He also revealed that plans are in place to issue special Sri Lanka Tourism Development Authority stickers for tourist transport vehicles that will allow them to get diesel at any bus depot throughout their travels. Meanwhile, with the public having had to deal with 7.5-hour power cuts from the past few days, some semblance of relief was announced. The chairman of the Public Utilities Commission, Janaka Ratnayaka, announced that there is a big possibility of the current power shedding schedule being completely done away with or durations being reduced. This, however, will depend on the single most important factor, sufficient fuel stocks. In the past week, assurances were given by the Ministries of Power and Energy that there would not be any interruptions from today. However, despite these assurances, only a reduction was announced today, with certain zones to experience a 2.5-hour power cut tomorrow. Areas designated as Zones A, B and C will experience this between 9 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. Zone A is said to have its power interrupted from 11:30 a.m. to 2 p.m. Zone B from 2 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. and Zone C from 9 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. In the meantime, the PUCSL has also issued a list of areas and critical infrastructure that will be exempt from power interruptions. These include all hospitals, industrial zones, power stations, the President's House, Parliament and the Parliamentarians' Residence Scheme.
And that's it from all of us here at First at Night. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.